we have Philip van der Merwe. Philip van der Merwe, former Springbok rugby player and turned businessman, living the dream in France with his wife in France, I'm assuming you met her in France with your little kids. Philip, tell us your story.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and it's great to be here and great to share some story and some lessons from my life. So as you rightly said, I'm down in the southwest part of France, the lesser known south of the France. It's not Nice and Cannes and all these lovely places. The town called Biarritz, very well known among the surfers for the lovely waves on the Atlantic Ocean. So it can be quite idyllic unless you in the winters. It's very green here for a reason because it rains about 300 days a year. But yeah, moved over here during COVID, and 5 years later we are still here. So embracing the remoteness of being able to work remote, but also being connected to Europe and being able to travel quickly enough to see clients. And it's a good space for my two boys to grow up in. Yeah.
And the Tour de France started a couple of days ago. Are you? They don't come through your.
No, they're missing us. Unfortunately, we're only about 100 kilometers away from the Pyrenees. So I am actually meeting up with some fellow South Africans coming up. Well, I suppose it's probably up to come see the Tour de France between Toulouse and Pau. So when they travel between Toulouse and Pau, they go over the Pyrenees, which is always a good one. And it's a massive event, the Tour de France, for France and for the world. It's one of the biggest spectator viewed events worldwide, and I've been lucky to actually have done a project for the Tour de France 3 years ago now. It's still running. We were working with a company to decarbonize the fleet of the Tour de France, because you can imagine they're moving, right through the whole France, 2,200 kilometers. All those teams, all the buses, trucks, cars, supporting vehicles, tourists. They've got a commercial caravan in front going. It's a lot of CO2 going up in the air, and they want to change that. So we worked a little bit on a strategy as to how can they approach a cleaner Tour de France.
Oh, that's interesting. I was actually watching, I think 2 nights ago, and I specifically remembered seeing something about that, about the carbon footprint, because I think a lot of the vehicles are electric vehicles and things like that as well. Yeah.
No, it's very interesting, and it's very the tour behind the tour is actually very as to what they're getting right, and it's impressive to work with such a big organization.
I'm actually supposed to be in France as we speak with my girlfriend watching the Tour de France, but we postponed it to next year.
Yeah. Okay.
So maybe I'll come visit you next year.
Get the camper van and follow it. It's very good.
Yeah. Flip, just going back to I don't want to say where you were born and et cetera, but your relationship with money and with finance from a young age, how has that evolved over time? And when can you remember? Is there a point that you can remember thinking and finding out about money and how important it was in life?
A very good question. You can say I was born in Potchefstroom, so you can say that. I think it gives a lot of context. Just for the listeners, Potchefstroom is a very big university town, and my old man was a professor over there. So it gives some background. It's interesting question. I've never thought about when's the first time I actually interacted with money. I can remember the day I got my first bank account. Trust Bank, what's known as Absa today was my one, and I think like many South Africans and people around the world, I still have that account. It's still alive and active. Hopefully no one from SARS is listening, but I'm from an Afrikaans background, so it was always very conservative, and discussions about money was always a little bit hammed. I think it changes from family to family, but always grew up from a farming background as well. Very sensitive about money and spending, and which resource goes where, and being very resourceful with what you have. So that's one part on the savings part, and the other part is an investing part. Is we got, now I forgot what's the effective trust.
Unit trusts.
Unit trusts, yeah.
Yeah.
Like when we were very young, exactly. My dad bought us all. I think it was like 300 hands of unit trusts.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you could, and yearly you got the statement. You could see it grow, and you didn't. So very quickly learned what interest is, and the power of interest, and how investing works, and so always gave some food for thought. Yeah.
Yeah. And when you, what do you tell us? What are you doing at the moment? What kind of work are you working on?
Interesting. So as you rightfully mentioned, was an average rugby player for a very long time. Always had a very good interest in finance and the data around finance and getting there. So I currently work as a strategy consultant at Level 6. It's my own consultancy I built up during COVID to develop data strategies for companies. So as companies prepare for the AI generation where we are going into, you need a very good foundation. You need a very good data foundation. So helping clients orientate to what they do with their data. Do they actually understand the goal that's within their own companies? And it's going well. There's a lot of questions being asked, of course. A lot of pointers going towards AI and how can we do what you want to do, but do it faster. And it's an interesting world, and it's as I said, it's only been 5 years, so we're learning every day.
Yeah. And how did you move from? What did you became a Springbok rugby player, but before that, you probably studied something, and then you did something while you were a rugby player, and then you sort of like, I don't want to use that word pivot because I hate it, but you moved to what you're doing now. There's so many, like the impression that a lot of people get about rugby players, and I know this isn't true, but they grew up in the mud. They ate the mud. And it was a typical boy, right? Typical boy playing in the sand, but pulling the girl's hair, and then going to play rugby, and then ruffian from ruffian to Springbok rugby player to what you are now. And I know that's not true, because I know a lot of guys doing well that were Springboks. I was at university with Andre Vos, and I know he was going to become a chartered accountant, and then he was grabbed by the Gauteng Lions, I think it was. But what is your perception of all that? Is that?
Yeah, the transition, I think, is a good word. A pivot, I'm in strategy consulting, so pivot we allowed to use. It's a good work when you've known you've screwed up, and you have to fix it. No, so the transition is definitely interesting. I've had a little bit of a fuller background. It wasn't as linear in the rugby sense for me. I was a bit of a late starter. I only signed my first professional contract with the Bulls at 24. Always hanged around, with the Cheetahs, etc. But played about 7 professional matches. Played a lot of rugby for the university. Was lucky to, in that time finish I studied finance, BCom finance, and did honors in economics. Sort of had an idea what's going on. Worked at Sanlam, as a good Bloemfontein boykie, as you do, before, and gave me a good view of what the world outside of rugby is like. I think that helped a lot. Triggered my interest in data and the power of big data and data visualization as to where you can show people, you can sort of predict the future, by analyzing the past. So that part always interests me. So when I moved to France in 2015, I completed my master's in data science, just to understand that part a little bit better. It was a bit contradictory because very quickly I realized, I'm not the type of guy that can sit 24 hours and write code. I was never a big gamer, etc. But I like to understand the why behind certain things and how stuff works. It's the way my brain is screwed up. So I got picked up by CGI. It's a big Canadian consulting firm that obviously had a footprint here in France. They saw my background in rugby and leadership, and then obviously a bit of data knowledge, and I was lucky to excel in certain types of classes that they saw value in. And worked with them on very big projects and companies like, for example, Michelin. Where you could see the backbone of a company like Michelin is quite impressive to work. So worked in a variety of teams there. Moved over to Accenture afterwards. That lasted until COVID wiped out a lot of the consulting work, and that was the right time for me to take the leap. And to get to your point about rugby players, it is often a perception. It's like you're a rugby player, and that makes the transition often a little bit harder. There's no real program for, like in the military, for example. There's a lot of programs where you go from military and you do like a focused transition program to go into business afterwards. Also because in the military you're forced to study and write exams to move up in general in the army. So these things are sort of type of things that still lack in rugby these days, still lack in professional sport. Is how do you help athletes to actually transition? Because a lot of athletes do go to study. Study, as like Andrew you would know, and it helps you nothing whatever you studied. If I ask you what you studied in the first term of your second year, you can't remember. You don't know. It's only through experience later on that you sort of realize how stuff works. But it's good to have a general knowledge of finance and tax and cash flow. How cash flow works, I think that's always.
No,
always
don't go there. Don't go there. I've recently learned how important cash flow is, because I've never really done work for companies before that have cash flow problems. But I actually made a comment today to somebody. Like as you do better and as your sales improve, your cash flow actually sometimes becomes under even more pressure. Any financial mistakes that you've ever made? Because obviously the podcast is about helping people like you, fellow people like you, to not make the same mistakes. Any mistakes?
Well, I think on the cash flow example, I think that's a very big lesson we learn when you start your own business. A South African expression that says, out of faith, love, and hope, cash flow is the most important. It is very, very, very quickly learned. In a consulting business, it is not a recurring income, so you have to plan a lot more careful, and sales doesn't equal cash flow, that type of stuff. So you learn it and then you live it, and it's two different. It's two different beasts. But as a young guy, I made two significant mistakes, that I'm very happy to share about, and that's how you learn. One was a private investment into a company called Spice Holdings. Had a great business model, still believed in it, where they sold cell phones and cell phone contracts to companies, and then, what is the correct word? They signed the contracts on the payslip directly. So the employer paid, and they direct credit from the payslips. and that was, say, 2009, 2010, where the credit laws were still a little bit grey area in South Africa. And so great business, I feel. But yeah, the jockeys were more cowboys than jockeys, and they basically just raised a lot of money. And an old rugby player actually raised a lot of money from influential people and just left. And then the second one was our Cape Town friend Steinhoff.
Oh my word! I can tell you
About
one too.
4 months about 4 months before the whole thing imploded, I sold a lot of very good shares and doubled up my holding in Steinhoff because it it went very well. And yeah, the rest is history. But yeah, that's how we learn. Huh?
I'm not happy for you, but it's nice to know. Like you said earlier, we're all in the same boat, right? Looking for work and trying to get the sales funnel, the opportunities down that sales funnel. But I made a very small investment into Steinhoff, which lasted a couple of weeks, let me say. So yeah, I did the same. But yeah, don't ask me about finance and investments. I'll teach people about finance and how to manage their companies and how to forecast. But when it comes to investing, Andrew's the wrong guy to go to, because Andrew,
Yeah,
whatever shares I invest in, don't follow me. Unless you want to
it's
lose
like
money.
SoftBank. Whenever SoftBank invests somewhere, you know you're probably in the wrong place.
My problem is I invest from the heart, right? Not from the head. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, in all the cases where I made bad financial decisions, it came down to due diligence. And as an ex-PwC, you should know all about due diligence, and
Yeah.
it's one about the people behind what's going on, and we should you know the rear view mirror is always cleaner than the windscreen, so it's always easy to look back and say, oh yeah, I saw that guy driving a Ferrari while
Yeah.
selling furniture. That doesn't really make sense. But the numbers were there, and it was picking up, so it was you felt like we were missing out. The same was with at Spice as well. Is they had the
Yeah.
CV behind them. They've built businesses before, and got wined and dined, and everything looked very flowery. And then also, you probably could see it coming by the type of people. Would you invite him for a beer at home?
Yeah.
Would
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
would you let that guy run your business? So
Yeah.
that's the big of it. And then the I've got very good advice. My years at Sanlam, I worked with SPW or Sanlam Private Wealth. I don't know I think they changed the name, so I don't want to. But
Glacier or something like that.
worked with great heads in the investment space in South Africa, Jacques Munich and David Boertes and those type of guys. And, their investment philosophy is so simple, so they go, what you brushing your teeth with in the morning, Colgate, okay, well, invest in Johnson and Johnson.
Egypt.
What do you drink on a Saturday? Castle. Well, okay, go invest in SAB, so
Yeah.
don't try and chase the new
Yeah.
next big thing, do the boring stuff, and don't get bored with being boring. Yeah.
Don't go invest in the next best thing that is sort of like a fly by night. And I think
Yeah.
that's the story of Bitcoin, isn't it? Because we don't know yet. The jury is still out. Nobody knows. It was brought
Yeah,
out for a specific reason, and then it turned into a speculative reason.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Bitcoin and the AI generation. There's a lot of companies popping up left, right, and center, and a lot
Yeah.
of experts popping out of the ground in terms of AI.
Yeah.
That you
Experts.
need to be. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
Experts that we need to be very wary of as to where you go, and understand the business. Understand the business. If you don't understand the
Yeah.
business, don't invest, because you're not going to
Yeah.
know where the money's going.
Yeah, I mean, what you say about people, right, is so important. I mean, to put your money into something based on a balance sheet and an income statement, and you can see how well this company has done over the last 3 years. Cash flow, great. net asset value on the balance sheet is growing and growing and growing. This is a great company. But then 2 months before you buy your shares, there's a new CEO appointed. The CFO just resigned. There's a new person, different personalities, different communication styles, different management styles, and all of a sudden, things start going wrong. I mean, I've seen it.
Yeah.
I've seen it from the opposite side. I've seen it from bad to good. So how one of my clients, I got involved, right? They didn't have a finance person, so I got involved, and we've hired an accountant and an ops guy and a this and a that and HR, and how things are sort of like progressing so well now because we're all on the same page and we put processes in place. We all have the same sort of where we want to end up at the end of the day. There's no politics. I think some of these companies, the people definitely make the company. There's no two ways about it.
No, it is. It's definitely, you see it, especially you can say a political sensitive country like South Africa. It's very important as well, is understanding who makes the calls, and and where does the money go, and which money goes to cover holes, and etc. It's
and it's
if there's a lot of changements, if there's a lot of changement on top all the time, then it's not a stable company.
Yeah. So have you reached out to the Red Bull team yet? I mean, there's a job going there.
I saw that, but I actually, there's a Frenchie that took over the team
From the other team.
From the smaller Red Bull team took the
Yes.
big one.
Yes.
Quite interesting changes that.
Yeah.
I think the water's a little bit deeper on his side than we think. I would like to get behind the story and know what's going on. But I imagine Verstappen's has something to do with it.
You think so?
Yeah, you could see there was a little bit of tension. There was in them, and you know how it goes, as in sport, like in business. As soon as a top performer is not doing well, then there's someone else to blame. You go stockbrokers blame the market when they're not doing well, and they tap themselves on the shoulder when they're doing well. So
it's also nice, and I haven't really followed Formula One until I met my current girlfriend Michelle 2 years ago, and she's a massive Max fan, and I've even built some Formula One Lego models, and I'm busy. I've built the Ferrari model, and I'm just about to start building the Red Bull model. And she said to me yesterday, she says, "Is there a market for that? Can you like return it still?" The Red Bull car. Am I allowed to return it and buy another vehicle?
Just gonna ask, is your Ferrari's gearbox still working, or is that broken as well?
Yeah. Flip, your understanding of finance, do you think that's helped you? Because you understand finance, because you studied it, you know about business. So you're going into business, let's say with your eyes open at least. I'm not saying there's no expert out there that will help you in your business. And I don't believe even the best university professor or the best finance person in the world will not necessarily be the right person for your business. But in terms of your understanding of business, your knowledge of finance, how has that helped you in your current business, would you say?
Again, I can't. It's like having maths at school. Something you never ever. I've never used an algebra. What do you call it? No, I can't even remember what you call it. But I've never used algebra in my life ever after.
Cosec is equal to 1 over sine or something like that.
But it teaches you logic, So that's the aim. So I think in finance is exactly sort of the same thing. So you have to understand the whole concept, from stock control to profit ratios, to tax is very important, to interests, and having a basic understanding of finance and calls, and economics. I think economics is very important. There's a lot of people missing basic economic concepts in when they make decisions, either business or how business works. And we're seeing it a lot when people start moving internationally as well, and how the certain market looks very big. Like for example, you sit in Cape Town, you think Europe is a great market, but people don't understand that Europe is divided in 18 countries, and each country's got his own language and his own system, and own tax rates, and and very complex, just coming in and just distributing it and making it work. So basic economic principles is also very important. It helped me, Andrew, as to say, the shoemaker's kids' shoes always have holes. It's understanding the concepts and being able to apply them as an entrepreneur is to different things, because it takes a lot of time and effort to be compliant and to be hyper strict with where your money goes. Sometimes you need to invest more, and investing can be from buying a dinner for 10 guys, up into to diversifying into different lines of innovation. So it's important to understand the impact of your investment, of where it's going, and also it gives you the ability to know who to trust. So if you have the team around you that runs your finance, whether it's in-house or fractional, I think it's very important to know what they're speaking about, understanding a balance sheet and how it operates, and where the money is going, and then be able to challenge them on that, because we all know balance sheet money is not money in the bank always, so the famous EBITDA concept, understanding that and knowing how to apply that in your business. Was a good story.
It was a good story, and it's recorded. But the one thing I want to say about your story, it's also important for entrepreneurs to know what questions to ask, right?
Yeah.
I think that is the most important thing. I think as an entrepreneur that doesn't understand finance, to be able to ask their finance person the right questions, because often you find the finance person actually doesn't understand themselves. It's quite
No.
shocking what I've come across recently.
Yeah. To be in line with that is I think what I've definitely learned in my life is we have too much confidence in our auditors, and we sort of wait on them for advice as to tax advice, as to investment advice, as to general cash flow advice, what to do, and it's not their job, and they're not necessarily qualified to do that. So it's very important to be finance savvy, to understand how to talk to them, and what questions you have to ask them to get the right answers, because you have to probe them a lot to get extra advice and free advice out of them.
And at the end of the day, you're the entrepreneur. You've got a finance person, let's say, as an example. The finance person is not going to be standing there with his pants down or with his shirt off, is he? It's going to be the business owner. I always say to entrepreneurs, I say, even if you've got a finance person, understand your numbers better than your finance person.
Yeah.
And they're scared. They're scared when I say that, because that means they need to learn. But it's not that
Exactly.
different.
Luckily, we have tools.
Yeah.
It's very important. It's very important as an owner that you understand margin, that you understand your costs, where the money is going, and there's I think every entrepreneur would have something different, depending on where they're going. But stuff like acquisition cost, customer acquisition cost, stuff like that. It's quite nuanced depending on which sector you are in. But it's very important to understand if I'm going to chase this big client, how much is it gonna cost me, and how much time is it gonna take me, where I could do 4 or 5 smaller ones, probably easier targets. So it's if you have that number running in your head and as to where to first economical principle, cut your losses and run. It's important to know that, and as you rightly said, every company that ever went bankrupt, they all had a CFO. You must just remember that.
Get the right person. And maybe I need to talk to you again and learn from you. When do I need to start running? Because I'm that, like I said earlier, I'm that Jack Russell that just keeps on biting at my potential client heels. My customer acquisition cost must be massive. I'm making a loss, I think, on a lot of jobs that I'm doing. Yeah. Flip to end off the session. I want to ask you, if you had to start over in life again, or what advice, and I'm just thinking how to ask this now, what advice would you give somebody else in your shoes? And let's be specific here. Let's be specific and say, what advice would you give a former Springbok rugby player exiting out of rugby? What kind of advice would you give them? Could be business advice or anything.
It's very good. It's the type of conversation that keeps you awake 2 o'clock in the night. No, it's to give you the butchery of rugby works like that. At young age you earn a very big salary, and then it as just before you stop, it goes even bigger, and then it just cuts straight off. There's not a little walkway to your end, and then you've got a pension that's going to fund you for a couple of years, and some money, and normally my case, I was 34, so you don't have all the grey hairs you need to start your business immediately, and you've been a rugby player. So one thing that I would definitely tell my younger self, I think I did the right thing with the studies, to get that, just the discipline and the knowledge of how stuff works in the world. I think that's very important, and that's alongside of the network that you make when you study wherever you go to study. I think that's very important to work with similar, like-minded people. Still very good friends with the people I made at Coffees, with the people I made at Cambridge, and both are equally successful. So it's a very interesting case study. But and for a rugby player, I would definitely say early on, start looking for cash generating businesses. So what can I invest in that generates a monthly income? Because the day when you retire, that's what you're going to need. If you start burning your savings, or the day that you stop and you're going to say, okay, now I'm going to invest for the next 5 years or 10 years in building a business, what is my savings going to look like then? I think that's one of the biggest thing. And surround yourself with very good people that can make those decisions for you intellectually, and look for businesses, because it's a tough landscape out there to go to look for a job, because I'm the best example. I've done a couple of interviews as well when the cash flow was low, and I was hesitating if I should continue or not, and got approached by a place, and they told me, well, you don't have the 7 years Accenture experience that we're looking for. After 6 interviews, 3 case studies, and then you go like, do you know what 14 years of rugby took? So it's important to understand. So it's not linear. People are not going to give you gifts just because you played rugby. So try and invest in income generating income generating businesses. 20% saving rule is not going to work in rugby. You need to be at 50-60% saving in stocks. That's as much a income generating business as any other. And then you'll be fine for about 10 or 15 years, but then you need to start, you definitely need to start looking for something that keeps you busy, because otherwise if you just sit around and drink beer around a fire, then the money is going to run out very quickly.
And how does, it's one last question. How does the Springbok experience and getting to know all the different people you've got to know through that experience, has that helped you at all post your rugby career?
It definitely has. It definitely has. I think that is an advantage that you have. It helps you open up a door. The they often say that about rugby players, that the older we get, the better we were. So you do tend to believe that you've got access more than you actually have. And you should understand that for every year that passes after you've played, there's new ex Springboks coming in the cycle that's trying to knock on the same door. So it's got a rack life, and if you didn't make those relationships before rugby, it's kind of difficult to pick them up afterwards and say, hey, I'm actually a nice guy or whatever. So. That said, I was bragging about sitting in the southwest of France. Being a Springbok in France is a different conversation. They don't necessarily like as much. It can have the opposite effect. And in general, people don't know rugby as much as they do. So it's a bit tougher. Whereas you say London and the city it's easier again. So. It definitely has helped. It's got its advantages and disadvantages.
Cool. Philip, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been very, very interesting.
It's great, Andrew. Thank you, and good luck with your business. And I'm pretty sure we'll speak again.
Yeah, we definitely will speak again.